Ross Harper. Now, Ross is one of Scotland's most successful property traders, and he's an award-winning developer with multiple businesses and an impressive property portfolio. Now, he's also a property auctions expert and is an owner of Auction House Scotland and National Property Auctions. And he also devotes a lot of his time to charitable work, including the Next Step Foundation. So welcome, Ross. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Hi, Helena. Thank you very much for the kind words. Thank you for having me.
That's fine. So I'm sure that we could talk about property for hours, and I think we'll get onto that in a moment. But I think before we do that, I'd love to know just sort of where it all started for you. What was it like growing up? I mean, were you one of those kids that was selling sweets in the playground?
So I was the opposite, actually. We came from quite a poor background, and my mum always had good intentions for making us as a family. I've got a younger brother and sister. She always had good intentions for us trying to better ourselves. So I was at quite an early age entered into various private schools to try and get a private education, which I was fortunate I got a scholarship. So I got to go to a private school, and which was a great education. And from there, you weren't really down to or forced down the route of selling things. I'm sure I took glass bottles and sold them to the cola lorry at the time and that type of thing. But apart from that, didn't really do any of that at all. After school, I went to university, and then my first job was technically my first job when I came out of university.
So you were sort of, I hear that you were a bit entrepreneurial with the selling bottles and things, but how did you really get into business?
So for me, getting into business was, I was quite shy at school. So I wasn't really that business orientated or all that focused on it. Getting through school was the important thing. When I went to university, it was an economics degree, but it qualifies you as a chartered surveyor. So up until that point, I hadn't really got an idea of what I was going to do. I just wanted to do something. I didn't really enjoy chartered surveying when I did my sandwich year, and I just thought, I need to learn. My big thing is if I'm weak in certain things, I'll go somewhere else, I'll learn other skills. And I was very fortunate. It was a recession in 1992-93, and I got a job as an estate agent, and that quite quickly, they kicked the nervousness out of me, the shyness. Basically, they make you into a machine that can go out and bring houses onto the market for them. So I was incredibly lucky at that point, but it was probably that part of it that saw me, or let me see what a business actually is, how it makes money. But it still took me 6 or 7 years to decide to do something myself.
So what made you make the move from being an estate agent to sort of owning your own business?
So complete fluke. I was quite a good estate agent. I won quite a lot of awards. I worked really hard. I didn't go lots of holidays and things. I didn't spend my money in fancy cars. I saved up and I bought a deposit in 1999 for a second house. So I had my own property. That was the only thing I'd ever bought. And I bought a second property, which was a flat in the centre of Glasgow. And I bought it, got the keys, and for 6 weeks I went down every night, stripped the wallpaper, painted it, did all the stuff. And the next door neighbour turned up a day later and said, or once it was finished, and said, "Look, I'd like to buy that from you." And stupidly I was saying, no, I want to keep it and rent it out. And then I said, "Well, what would you pay?" And I had paid 50,000 for it 6 weeks earlier. And he said, "I'll give you 75,000, but I want it in a couple of weeks' time." And at that point, that was more than half my salary for a year that I'd made in 6 weeks doing the work myself. So I suddenly thought this was quite a good idea. So that's how I got started. I did one of those, and then I think I started another one again with the idea I would rent out. Buy to let as a term didn't exist at that point. And again, I sold it and took the profit. And then I suddenly realised within 4 or 5 months I'd made my annual salary quite quickly, and decided that probably that's a better route to take for me. And that's what kind of kicked it off. So it's just about the kind of turn of the millennium when I decided I would go it alone.
So what age were you when you did that?
So I was 29 when I started. So I was quite late. I only bought my second house at the age of 29. So lots of the guys I'm talking to just now, lots of people who are involved in partners in property are so much younger, so much further ahead, so much further down the line. And the fact that I've bought thousands of houses now and I've done lots of different things, it started quite late for me. I was very late to it. But the reality is that it doesn't matter when you start. The trick is that you have to start.
Yeah. And would you say it's more difficult starting now? Because I know everyone sort of everyone says that, back in the day back in the day, it was that houses were the price of avocados now. So all you millennials, you can't, you should be spending your money on property and things like that. And it doesn't quite work like that anymore. So do you think it's much easier now?
No. So I think there's a lot more information now. So historically, I was actually a chartered surveyor and I was an estate agent. I'd probably sold hundreds and hundreds of houses at the time, and I decided I would buy another one for myself. So I had information which wasn't readily available. The thing about now is a lot of information is available, even by virtue of us having this discussion digitally. Other people are going to learn the process or might think, well, that's a good idea, I might do this. That type of thing wasn't available then. Yes, the houses were cheaper, but there were no products. It was very hard to get a buy-to-let mortgage at the time because it didn't really exist at that point in time. Whereas you can get buy-to-let mortgages quite easy. It's a natural product. So there's pros and cons to both. I think if you look at the acquisition of property and holding on to it for a long period of time as being the way to make money in property, the reality is having bought 10 years earlier is great because your cost base is lower, but there's a lot more things. I ran for quite a number of years. I ran a serviced accommodation business, which I got out of, and then it became incredibly easy to do serviced accommodation 2 or 3 years ago because that was a growing market. Now serviced accommodation is not as easy. Now there's a lot more legislation. So it's not so much about time, it's more about timing. But I think, yes, if you could own 100 houses 10 years ago, you're probably in quite a strong position now.
And certainly not serviced accommodation now in amidst this
absolutely
either. So definitely timing is key. Now, look, you're involved in so many different ventures, and I just don't know how you have enough hours in the day to do it. What does a typical day look like for you?
I tend to, until lockdown, I would get up in the morning relatively early, get up and get out, be out for 6:30. And I don't really have a routine, so I don't normally have a computer. Until lockdown, I didn't have a laptop or a computer at all. I do everything on my mobile phone, and I tend to drive around in my pickup truck during the day, going to various sites, business meetings. Business meetings tend to be in coffee shops, and drive about. Most of my business is conducted over the phone, a little bit of it by email, some of it by social media. And I tend to be quite responsive to being able to I like going to see houses. I like going to see commercial units, industrial units, things that can make money, things that I can buy. So I've set it up so that I've got a team of people who look after my various businesses for me. And they're all spectacular people. Mandy, who runs my auction company, she runs my trading business and my property trading. She can do the whole thing inside out. She doesn't really need me. So the only time she needs to talk to me is if she wants to bounce an idea off me. Quite often I'm picking up keys on a Friday for a house that I've never seen, don't know anything about, but I've bought it, I've paid for it, and this is me getting the keys to go and see it, to see how to exit it. So I tend to spend a wee bit of my time. I'm quite lucky I get to do this, or have to date, got to do the stuff that I really like out of it. So my days are very atypical compared to most people. I like doing business face to face. I'd never been in a Zoom call until 6 weeks ago. It's not the way I've done business, but I do quite like it. I actually much prefer it to the telephone now. And you can see things are changing. But for me, I like to meet people. I like to talk to them. I like to get the cut their jib to see whether I can trust them or not, whether it's worth getting to know them better. And I think that's quite hard to do over the phone. So I spend a bit of time, for me, each day networking. I'm trying to meet people, meet new people, whether it's buyers, sellers, investors, people with businesses I want to invest in, or vice versa, people that would like to invest with me. So most of my time to date has been, the last 3 or 4 years, it's been meetings and coffee shops and just chatting to people. Doesn't really feel like real work, to be honest.
So would you say the majority of your time is dedicated to trading property?
Yes, definitely. That's the bit I quite enjoy. I spent quite a number of years setting up an estate agency and then an auction company post the last recession in 2008 to 2013. And we built that up over 6 or 7 years. It's the second biggest auction company in Scotland. And last year we launched an online estate auction company, national property auctions throughout the UK. So at certain times, what I tend to spend most of my time doing is setting up a business, coming up with the ideas for it, organising the marketing with people. I don't do any of it. I don't have terribly many skills in many areas, but I tend to find people who are good at doing things, get them involved in the project, oversee the project probably to the point of completion and execution, and then get somebody to run it. Hopefully I've brought them into the process further down the line. Certainly that's what's happened with the last few businesses. And then I can step aside from it. You can watch it, see how it's going, and I tend to spend a wee bit of time. But in the background, my team are trying to generate properties that we can buy into the process. So in the last 7 or 8 years, we've maybe bought 1,200 houses, and those 1,200 houses need to be sold. And that's the bit I tend to look at. Do we just sell it straight on to another investor? Do we put it out through the auction company? Do we give it to a local agent? Or do we spend the time refurbishing the property and doing it up? So I tend to look after that part time-wise, and the part at the end once it's refurbished and getting it back onto the market. Because for my sins, quite a lot of people I know are estate agents, so you tend to know who to talk to and how to try and get the best price or get the property sold quickly.
So what have been some of your sort of biggest challenges that you've experienced in property?
So I think my biggest challenges have been all to do with people, I think. Because my businesses are not, it's not a traditional business that somebody can copy all that easily. We tend to have lots of staff members of people who have come in that we've trusted, who have let us down and haven't done what they said they're going to do, or have done things maliciously, and that's caused kind of challenges, because as I'm not hands-on with it, it's something you then have to go back and repair. So the biggest issues, I think, are people being let down by the people who are within the businesses. I was very quick to adopt a strategy where I don't have a great deal of interest in money. What I was interested in doing was setting up systems that could do things easily. So for me, if I buy a house for £150,000 and spend £20,000 on it, other developers will do their utmost and hold on to it for 6 months or 9 months to sell it on for £250,000. Whereas I would rather sell it out at £225,000, make a lot less profit, but know that the thing's sold in 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And the systems were all created to facilitate that, make it easy, and make the process quicker and easier, because that recycles the money quicker and allows you to buy more property. And it means also the time value of having that those deals done means the money's in the bank. And that was the thing that 2008, 2009, 2010 told me or taught me, was that you can't spend equity. You can't eat equity as an expression. So I had a lot of money tied up in houses, whereas in the last few years I've tried to retain a bit more liquidity. And so for me, stock has always been a big issue. You're trying to stock so that you can either buy it, sell it, flip it, trade it, or rent it out. So I just made it very easy for people to bring stock to us. We pay bigger fees to people who are sourcers and lead generators. We look after people that look after us. And for me, it's not always about me making all the money. Sometimes you have to play second fiddle to somebody else. But in the long run, what that's allowed me to facilitate is a business that generates lots and lots of deals. At this moment in time, in lockdown, we can't do any trading, but I've got purchases, maybe around about 100 units that I've got in contract at the moment that we're trying to go through. I'm trying to buy a school at the moment for my care homes. That's again held up just now with lockdown. I've got lots and lots of deals going, but that's just a standard month for us. We're quite keen to do lots and lots of different things. So I identified stock is king. That's the most important part. So how you find your deals is critically important for everybody. I just made it really easy to do that. Secondly, for most people in my type of business, money is always a problem, and it doesn't matter whether you're worth £1, £100,000, £1 million, £10 million. It's always finding enough money to buy the deals, and also being able to feed those deals at the time when they need the money. So I've always made it not about us, and that means that the seller gets to choose what the dates are. You make it very easy for the seller to sell to you, and you're more likely to get a deal done. So I had one last year where when we bought the property, we bid a figure, I think it was £120,000 for a flat in Glasgow. I thought it was worth £250,000 done, but it was ripped apart, had squatters, at this horrendous story. And he had a previous offer from a developer who'd really messed him around for 100,000. I think we offered 120, I think was what we offered. And the developer, as soon as he heard we were interested, put his offer up to 140. And the seller came back and said, no, I like the way you said you'll give me the money. You've done what you said you're going to do. we bought it for £120,000, and the day I bought it, I sold it on to somebody else for £220,000. So we made £100,000 net profit. I didn't even have to come up with the purchase price. The person that bought it from me paid his 220 before I had to pay the 120. I just got an online payment of nearly £100,000 in my bank that afternoon from the lawyer. But these types of deals sounds amazing, sounds fantastic. You make £100,000 in a minute, and it doesn't, you don't have to put any money in. But the reality of it was, it's just down to the way the systems were organised, that we did what we said we would do with the seller, and we gave him the money he wanted the day he wanted it, and also we made it so it was very easy for him to deal with this. And I think, irrespective of the volumes, we're always trying to stay quite humble with what we do. It's always protect the seller. We deal with a lot of people who are in difficult circumstances. Now, that's a great business model, because very often they're selling cheaper properties, or they've got other reasons that they need to move. But I think we always, as investors, have to look after their position quite well. So in lockdown, I've got 2 houses where the previous owners, I've paid for their house, and they're staying in the house. I'm not charging them rent, because they were in tough positions anyway, but they couldn't get into the houses because of lockdown that they were meant to move to, and they weren't capable of doing it. So we've just said, just stay there, we'll sort it out once it's all finished, and we'll get it done. But I think if you look after people, that makes the property side of it a little bit easier.
Yeah. Now, I know you mentioned you did, a deal in a day where you bought it and then sold it on immediately. Now, yeah. Ross, I know you're quite a straight talker. Do you believe in overnight success?
Yes, but it probably takes about 30 years to appear, is the way I always look at it. So, yeah, yes, you can be very... you can have a really good idea that takes off, and that can be overnight. But to be fair, for most people, it's not the way it works. The people I think are most successful are the ones that invest in, I'm going to say education with apostrophes around it, because I'm not really talking about property education. That I get seen as the overnight success thing gets labelled at me, because you buy 100 houses in a month and people think, I've never heard of him before, it's an overnight success. But I can point to, I've been doing this, I'm 48, and I've been doing this since I was 17 years old. And the first one was really hard, and the second one was really hard, and the third one was really hard. So all that time and effort that you've gone to learning, and also all the difficulties and challenges you've overcome, allow you to do things now that other people can't do. But that's taken 20 or 30 years to get to that point. I have watched, probably just because of social media, you can see people saying that they're doing incredibly well, that they are overnight successes. But the difficulty is they probably haven't lived through any hard times. They've not lived through any downturns. A lot of people I know are operating service accommodation businesses where they've gone from zero to hero, it sounds like, and they're driving fancy cars and they're leasing big houses, and everything seems amazing and it looks great on Facebook and Instagram. But the reality of it is, these are the same people just now who perhaps can't afford to pay their rents if they're in rent-to-rent programs. It's people who don't really have any understanding of how to fix things, how to do things. So I think success, by virtue of the marketplace, has to be measured over a period of time. But that time itself, for some people, it's an awful lot shorter. I've got a good friend, Adam, who has a portfolio now of 250 houses that he's built up in 4 or 5 years. So whether you look at that and think he's an overnight success or not, I think he is. I think he's done really well in quite a short period of time. But the reality of it is, it's still taking him quite a long time to do that.
And throughout this time, what's been your single most biggest challenge, would you say?
Keeping, I think it comes back down to people. I think it's keeping the right people in the right jobs, and ensuring that they want to do the job. Various companies that I've got, people have to work quite hard. The way the systems are all set up and the way the business are set up is quite long hours. So for me, it's keeping these people happy that you want to have there is quite an important part of it. And ensuring, now I operate something called a no dickheads policy, which I learned from the New Zealand rugby team. And that basically means that as soon as we've got a sniff of somebody who's a wrong one or who's not hardworking, we just get shot immediately. I used to go round thinking, they'll come good, they've got good chat, they can do this, they can do that. It will come good. It never does. So we get rid of them very quickly. So I think that's probably the biggest, to be honest, that's the biggest set of issues. Money comes quite easily when you're buying, selling and trading, because you've got assets. I've set up strategies to get the properties. But I suppose I talk to people about being a child of 2008. So I lived through a horrible time in the last credit crunch when I was overexposed financially and didn't have any money, didn't really have a job. I was a property trader who flipped and traded. You couldn't borrow money. And it was very hard to buy houses. You didn't know where the market was going to be. So as I was growing my businesses post 2008, because I lost everything. 2008 was a really tough time for me. I wasn't a bankrupt, but I was zeroed in terms of my properties and everything that I had to start again after that. And I'd always had at the back of my mind that I didn't have a business that wasn't totally reliant on property. It was all I've ever done. So my biggest challenge in business was actually finding a business that I wanted to be involved within, that met my own kind of thoughts in terms of being a social impact business, something that did good as opposed to just made money, something I could be proud of. That was important. But I also wanted a business that was asset backed and it had to be funded by the government in some ways. And that for me, it's actually a really tricky set of things to try and find, especially if you don't have skills. So I set up a charity called the Next Step Foundation, and that basically helped bring sports people when they're coming to the end of their career. We were training them, helping them with the difficulties in terms of alcohol addiction, drug addiction, all these horrible things that are just underlie sport or just lie just under the surface. And that was great we ran that for a year, and that set it up, I paid for it, brought staff in. And at the end of that year, it was like we were dealing up with a lot more of the youth teams, and those youth teams then brought me into the fact that we liked dealing with children. We got a lot more out of helping them grow. And then from that point of view, that's where I get into care homes for children, which I've now got as a business that's going fairly well. But my point being, that was my biggest challenge, was I didn't know how to find that business. I didn't even know what that business was at the outset. And 2 years of trying to find something, I set up mortgage brokerages, I set up letting agents, I set up all sorts of different things that were on the side, but they didn't really work the way I wanted. It wasn't really giving back. So albeit they were okay businesses, there was no benefit to owning them. So, but it was my biggest challenge was finding that, and the way to do it was going to try and do something completely different, which is what I did with the charity, which then allowed those things to appear for me. Quite lucky.
Yeah, I mean, it is really fantastic that you've found all of these different things. That I think there are certain components that you have to have in life, right, that have to bring you some sort of either certainty or some sort of pleasure out of doing it, or have to bring the money or the security or whatever it might be, and you seem to have a really, really good mix of that. So I mean, in terms of let's
yes, absolutely, I totally agree with that. And I think the other I broke up there.
What were you saying?
I was just going to say that the other thing is, as you go older, I've suddenly realised that not everybody is the same in terms of what floats their boat and what they want to do. I get up and go to my work quite early. I try and finish early because I've got a little boy who's 4, so I want to go home and see him at night time before he goes to bed. And lots of people say, well, why do you still get up and go and do that? You don't need to be away at that time. But I actually enjoy the time in the morning on my own. I enjoy getting in the car, driving to work, thinking what my day is, planning who I'm talking to, what's happening, going to the site, having that as my own time. Lots of my friends who are in jobs or have their own companies have a completely different work structure. But it's kind of finding what you want to do and then hoping that you're good at it. That's the other side of it, and can make enough that you can then enjoy that time. That's the way it's kind of worked for me. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, sometimes you just don't know what you'll be good at necessarily. You just have an idea of something that might seem like you might enjoy it, and you just don't know if you're any good or even if you enjoy it when you start doing it.
Absolutely, that's exactly it. The good thing about property is there's so many different facets to it that there is something for everybody. There's lots of people can do completely different jobs or can have completely different businesses within property, still make money and still enjoy it. But it's a tricky world, to be honest, to try and find that straight off. And in fairness, I don't think anybody makes a go of their first business necessarily the way they could. There's lots of people jump from one good business to the next. That's quite common because there's lots of constituent parts that they can maybe put over from previous businesses. I think property's got so many different facets to it that there's definitely something that everybody can do.
Yeah, certainly in property as well, because there are so many, like you said, there are so many different ways of essentially doing the same thing. And it's whether you might go down the creative route and whether a project's going to take you 6 months or it's going to take you 6 days or it's going to take you 6 years, no matter whether you're going to be working by yourself or whether you're reliant on other people. Now, I think that if we move on to sort of auctions, that's definitely for someone that likes certainty, because it's just gonna happen whether you like it or not. So I suppose for those that don't really know what what is a property auction and sort of what are the benefits of buying properties at auction?
So, in the main, most people use estate agents to buy and sell houses. And in the majority of cases, if a house hasn't sold through an estate agency process, the traditional end of the marketing process, if it hadn't sold, would be to go to an auction. And an auction, very simplistically, is a meeting point of the buyer and the seller, where there's a bunch of pre-existing conditions which are published in a catalogue. So the seller agrees all those conditions, the auctioneer creates the environment to get them together, and they bring lots of buyers into the room who bid against each other. eBay is the perfect auction because it's done online, but you can see lots of buyers get to view things, they then bid against each other. The person who pays the highest amount gets to secure the lot, and that's the same in property auctions as well. I think Homes Under the Hammer shows all that's good about auctions and how it works, because there's packed rooms full of people all bidding for properties. It's a really secure system. The thing I liked about it was the certainty of the deal. I was really, really hacked off by chasing after lots of properties through agents and either getting gazumped, sellers pulling out, all sorts of different things. And where you're trying to buy cheaply and where you're trying to sell quickly, auctions are a much quicker way of doing it, because when the hammer falls, that's the contract mate. There's loads and loads of technical terms which I won't go into just now, but the simple form is if the hammer falls on a property above the reserve price, the property is sold. The seller is committed to buying it and to selling it, and the buyer's committed to buying it, and the contract is watertight. Neither can pull out. So it's a fantastic scenario for making sure the deal gets done. And from a property trading perspective, it means you're not doing a lot of work that's wasted. You're not wasting lots of time not to get the property sold.
So I think there's differing opinion on this, and I'd love to hear your opinion. What for a novice investor, say they, I don't know, maybe they own their own home already and they're looking to get into property investment, maybe take on a project where they might do something up, or if they're just looking for a house that's ready to go, get some tenants in there. Should a novice investor buy in auction? Is that a good idea?
Okay, so given that they may well, as you say, own their own home, they're likely to have been through the process, understand what a survey is, understand what a mortgage is, understand what a solicitor's job in the process is. I think with auctions are an awful lot safer than most other forms of transaction, because the seller, basically you know what the property is long before you have to bid for it. There's generally a legal pack, certainly with all the legitimate auctions, there's a legal pack where you can send that to your lawyer, and for a small fee, he can check out all this. So by the time you actually get to bidding for the property, you could have had it surveyed, you could have spent the money on a survey. And I quite often say to people, don't get it surveyed after the auction. If you're going to spend £300 on something, get it done a week before the auction. Get the information so that you know if it's a major problem or what you're dealing with or how to deal with it. So you can have your solicitor look at the legals, your surveyor can look at the auction. You get enough time, then you know exactly how to organise your finances, whether it's personal cash, whether you're borrowing money from another investor, whether you're using bridging finance, any of these types of things, or even in some cases getting a mortgage. You can get all that work done beforehand, but you have to do the work. The downside of that is if you don't secure the property at the auction and somebody pays more for it, you've spent a lot of time and effort and perhaps a wee bit of money trying to get to that point. But what I think by doing the work beforehand, or auctions allows you to do, you can see all the problems, warts and all, and you can make a really informed decision. You're not pressured into doing anything. The estate agency process probably allows you a wee bit of time to do or be lazy, and you could do that work afterwards. When you make a bid for a property, you then find out what the problems are legally, you might have it surveyed afterwards and then find there are more issues, which makes the deal is more likely to make the deal fall apart, or you've paid too much for it, or you're in a situation where somebody else can also come along and take the property away from you. It's kind of a gazumping process. So if you're a novice buying an auction, there's no real reason to make mistakes other than you don't know what you're doing, or you don't follow that simple process of getting the work done quickly. So for myself, where we're buying like lots of properties, I'm happy to buy at auction. We don't even go and see the properties. We'll have somebody cast their eye over the legals. For a lot of the properties, once you've got experience, you know what you're looking for, you know where the problems may lie. But as a novice, you can actually get somebody else to check all these things for you. There are even auction experts who you can pay a small fee to. They can do all the work for you and present you with a report. So those types of things can really help novices buy through auction and strip away all the problems. It's actually just a separate selling process, separate to estate agency. It's just done in much smaller numbers. Auctions probably account for 4 to 5% of the market over the last 3 years. So it's not a huge number, but I think it is getting more prevalent now.
And what would your tips be? Because I know there's a lot of, I suppose, psychology that goes into it as well, because not only just in terms of the room itself, in terms of who's bidding, I don't know, even going to the viewing and checking out the competition and all of that work that goes into it. And then, you maybe start a bidding war with
You've been reading up on this, haven't you?
Far too excited. But I mean, when you do get to that point, and I mean, even opening up the auction catalogue, you think, oh wow, on the day I know nothing about it, but this is going to be a fantastic deal. What would your sort of tips be, your kind of guidebook of auctions in terms of what to do, what not to do, just for someone that's really interested in it?
So first things first, kind of identify, Rightmove's the best starting point for everything, irrespective of whether you're buying an auction or an agency house. Have an idea of what you would like to buy. So if it's a 3-bedroom terraced house that you're going to rent out or hold on long term and rent to a family market, do your homework in what areas you want to do. I know that you invest in an area that's not close to home, so you've gone and you'll research that area and you'll know exactly where you're doing because you'll live in one area and invest in another. So get to know that area quite well, and that will give you a very general feel for what 3-bed terraced houses have been. Don't rush in and buy the first one you see unless you know it absolutely fits the criteria you're going for. So many people decide and get fixated on it must be that house, it's that house or it's nothing. Lots of houses come onto the market, they get sold for all sorts of different reasons. So there's no real reason to rush in and jump in immediately. I would go and visit a couple of auctions and see what they're like. They're all completely different. You can't second guess what's going on in the room unless you're sitting in a room that has no other people in it. You don't know who's bidding for what, how much they're bidding, what the telephone bidders are. So there's no point in. I don't even waste my time with that. I look at things. I think I'm prepared to pay 100,000 for it. If it goes for 101, I don't want to buy it, and I don't go above. So speak to the auctioneers before you go. It's all this is about attrition of information. More information you get before the auction takes place, the better. The more times you can speak to the auctioneer, the auction staff, the more of a chance they're going to let something slip that might help you. Also, if you try hard and get on the good side, they might actually help you get the lot as well by telling you, well, we've only got 3 people bidding for that one, we've only got 2 people bidding for this one. Try and bid before the auction. I would always have a cheeky offer before the auction. Lots of auctioneers won't entertain it, but that doesn't mean every auctioneer doesn't entertain it. We certainly would talk to people because you don't know if the person on the other side of the auction is under pressure to sell immediately and doesn't want to wait to the auction. It might not be about price. So I would definitely always have that discussion and just view it as though it's a product as opposed to something that you get emotionally attached to. So I was gutted when I sold the first house, when the man came and knocked the door. But I was hoping to make £450 or £500 rent, minus a mortgage payment, for how many years it would take to make. And I was willing to jeopardise a £25,000 profit for that, which is probably, it was a ridiculous position to be in. But that's because I was quite attached to it. It was my first house. I refurbished it. I'd done the decor. I'd done this. I'd done that. But actually, the business decision was just sell it straight on. I think when you're buying, it's not about making money in the here and now, but you can certainly set your deals up that your profit is done in the purchasing as opposed to hoping you get a great price when you come to sell it. If you can buy something at a discount to value just now, that's only going to benefit you much, much further down the line. And lots of people have made good profitable businesses and strong profitable businesses by buying at lower prices. Auctions allow you to do that. So it's get your homework done first, make a cheeky offer, get to the auction room early. I always position myself in the middle of the room at the side so I can see who's bidding, who's doing things. I'd like to think I know when the auctioneer is taking bids off the chandeliers or off the wall, which they're allowed to do. There's no illegality to that. But you really don't know what's happening, and you won't know right until the end. If I'm buying something in the room, I don't bid. I have never, well, in recent years when we're bidding in rooms, I have never bid until the auctioneer has said going, and before he says going, that's the only time I'll step in. So the person thinks they've won it, and even if there's been frantic bidding elsewhere, I never step in right until the end, because it's what you're talking earlier about, the emotional side of it. If they think they're going to win it, they then get pissed off. You make a final bid and it annoys them and they don't rebid. You might then secure it for a cheaper price. So it's holding your water. But it's also putting yourself in a position that you're just doing things that other people don't do. We've had scenarios in our own auctions where husband and wives have been bidding against each other. They're so desperate to get it that one of them raised £15,000 between a husband and wife team. And ultimately the auctioneer said, you know what's happening in the middle of the auction, you know what's happening here, you're bidding against your husband. And she hit him with her handbag when they realised what they'd been doing. It was comedy genius and or comedy gold. And so people get emotionally attached to the whole thing. It's a product, it's a house that somebody's going to buy. We're obviously involved in some of the same networking groups where people wax lyrical about the things they want to buy and that they want to own. For me, it's a bit more mercenary. I think we're kind of looking for things that make money and make profit, whether it's profit now on a straight flip or a trade or something we'll hold on to and gather rent for a period of time and make profit. So the key thing about profit is buying at the lowest possible price. And auctions actually, in fact, that's the easiest way to do it.
If you want to keep up to date with all our latest content, then make sure to subscribe, hit us with a like on Facebook and Instagram, and remember, stay healthy and wealthy.